Toyota Material Handling is now providing a factory rebate of up to $2,500 when you trade in a Toyota or a competitive unit. Now, through September 30th, 2024, trade in your forklift and get a new industry-leading Toyota forklift. This rebate applies to electric and internal combustion models. Unlock your upgrade today by visiting toyotaforklift.com. That's toyotaforklift.com, or click the link in the show notes.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Cian Denvir, who is the Director of U.S. Business for Proactive Global, and he is on the recruitment side of things for warehouse automation and robotics. So we're going to get a little bit of a different perspective from the recruitment side of things. We're going to dive into some of the things that he's seeing in the industry, just in general, in terms of trends around automation and robotics. And we're also going to talk a little bit about kind of the talent development on that side and how people can potentially get into that side of the business, and also a little bit about a topic that is very interesting to me and I'm passionate about as I teach my students and things. How do we get the next generation of talent into this industry, into automation, robotics? How do we kind of develop that, and how do we build those things? So we're going to talk with Cian today about that. So, sir, thank you for joining me here. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm keen to talk about all things warehouse automation.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's like your passion, man. So I'm definitely excited to talk to you about this and get you on the show here. So why don't you tell us first, I guess, a little bit about, because you work for Proactive Global. So tell us a little bit about Proactive Global and tell us about your background a little bit too, and how you ended up with this focus on automation and robotics.
Yeah, so I'll start with Proactive as a business, because I think it's kind of important to start there. And then I can maybe track back into how I ended up in this industry and how I ended up in recruitment altogether and take it from there. So Proactive is the biggest, technically the biggest warehouse automation recruitment business. So we as a business have been in business for 16 years now. One of my colleagues, Gerard Hegney, has actually been recruiting in warehouse automation for 16 years, which I find kind of super interesting because he's been through all the evolutions of the products. But I lead our North American practice, and the focus is really in 4 really key areas. So we recruit for kind of OEMs and system integrators of material handling products. So, like the Vanderlandes, the Knaps of the world, the Fortners, etc. We work with robotics businesses from, C through to public businesses. So business that we've helped to like Geek, High Robotics, Grey Orange. We work with end users to help them build material handling and automation programs and kind of endeavor into automation for the first time. So someone to pull from that would be like Americold Logistics. We supported them in actually kind of building the first warehouse automation team and program internally. And then I think the last and slightly different area that we focused on recently is the venture side of warehouse automation and intralogistics broadly. So supporting VCs in identifying businesses that are looking for investment, and likewise helping young and growing automation providers and OEMs, providing them with connections through to VCs to actually get funding. And our involvement there is more so, it's like, do you need fractional staffing or do you need introductions? Basically working to help cultivate an ecosystem of growth within the industry. But yeah, we focus on anything within, call it the full project life cycle. So from pre-sales right through to, execution, implementation, testing, and customer service. We do everything within warehouse automation specifically. I think that the story of how I got into warehouse automation recruiting is an interesting one. I've been doing it for kind of 4 or 5 years, and I think the reason that I took an interest in it so much is because my dad was actually a general manager at Lint and Bailey's in a big DC in Ireland, in Dublin.
Okay.
And I spent my time with my dad when he wasn't working, like in a 44-ton truck, like eating crisps with him and just talking, operations. And at the time, none of it really had any bearing on me as a person. But as I kind of dropped into recruitment, I had a couple of options in terms of what market I wanted to pursue. And I was talking to some folks on warehouse automation. And I just thought, okay, this kind of interests something quite young in me. I'm finding it quite exciting. Obviously, it's high growth. So let's start here. And I guess the rest is kind of history, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's super interesting. And, it's interesting too, like to hear about Proactive Global and how it started like 16 years ago, because I think like there had to be like a real vision there. If I think back like 16 years, like, like the automation and robotics wasn't necessarily as prevalent as it is right now, right? So, I mean, certainly, like you mentioned, seeing those different evolutions, and obviously very interesting that you found yourself in here too after, having that operations background in the family as well. I mean, I think it's always interesting to hear how people kind of come into this space, and I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today too, right? From the talent perspective. So tell us a little bit about kind of, as we look at that, right? And we look in this space, we see, obviously you mentioned a lot of startups, a lot of companies that are well established too within the space that have been around for several years. But there's definitely, I see like a kind of an ongoing need for people to kind of come into the space. So tell us a little bit about kind of like some of the current dynamics of talent within just the warehouse automation and robotics market itself.
Yeah, I think we are I don't want to say we're at the start of amazing growth, because the industry's been growing fantastically well, bar, last year being quite a blip for quite some time now. But I think one of the first things to call out is you typically see talent hop from one company to another within the space, and it's quite incestuous in the sense that everybody knows everybody.
Oh yeah.
So one of the dynamics that we've seen is, there is a big culture of grabbing someone from a competing systems house, or adding someone from a startup that's focused on a product line that you want to start implementing, or selling into a new market. I think last year, so pre-2023, I saw massive inflation of salaries, and I saw a lot of people kind of making moves and making the switch. There was, I think we called it the Great Resignation, in that people were moving jobs more frequently for pretty substantial pay increases. What I've seen is a cooling effect. Amazon obviously laid off a bunch of people and pulled a bunch of money or projects from the industry. The demand, therefore, has slightly gone down, especially on the greenfield side. And that's led to some layoffs. Like some of the big systems houses have laid people off. The demand before Amazon pulled all the work from the industry was fantastic. And it led to some really inflated salaries. People were getting kind of 50, 60% increase on their current salary to join a business that was supporting like an Amazon or a UPS, for example. Now that demand has kind of cooled a little bit, or at least we're in a transition year. So you've got the elections, you've got high interest rates. There's not as much greenfield automation and therefore like big projects about. So you've seen a lot of layoffs, and a lot of people coming into the market are on really inflated salaries. And for me, I've seen a cooling of salaries and offered salaries from businesses that we're recruiting with, because they're not winning greenfield projects. They're doing kind of more brownfield stuff, more retrofits, which are, I guess, you need to win more of them to do more revenue as a business.
Yeah.
So as a result, the knock-on effect is they're not paying as much, or systems integrators and OEMs are not paying as much for talent this year. And there's a bit of a mismatch between, a salary that might be worth $200,000 2 years ago is maybe now worth $175,000 a year for a systems integrator. So there's a bit of an expectations mismatch, and I think that means that there's a lot of great talent that's out of work because their expectations are too high. So I think that's the first thing I would really call out is salaries are still great, but they have cooled slightly from the highs of Amazon and COVID. So yeah, I would definitely say that's the first thing, as well as like the call it swapping between systems integrators and
Yeah.
that kind of cycle.
Yeah. Do you see, I'm curious because you mentioned in there like some of the layoffs and stuff, and obviously there's been some big ones that have been out there in the last like year in terms of the news. Some were like surprising, I would say, like from my perspective. And also some I guess quote unquote restructurings too as well, as people like to position them in that way. I mean, do you foresee that, with kind of that pullback of some of the money that's been out there, like you mentioned from Amazon or EPS specifically? I mean, do you see more of that coming and happening, or do you think the market has kind of leveled itself out at this point?
We'll be back after a quick break.
When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Carton Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Carton Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people, and those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Carton Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartoncloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes.
So I was at Automate 2 weeks ago, and I went to the Interact Analysis talk, and there's a general consensus that this year is the bottoming out year, and that things are looking quite positive back end of 24 through 25. What I've certainly seen is, because there were so many deferred projects because of such high interest rates in the US specifically, there's been a lot of deferred work from 2023 into 2024. So some businesses started the year with massive pipelines to execute upon. And I think this year, whilst it may be called a bottoming out, will actually be quite a productive year for a lot of systems integrators, because a lot of their deferred 2023 pipeline may be realized in 2024, as well as the general consensus from the systems integrators is that customers can't actually push out projects forever. They are at some point going to have to pull the trigger because budgets reset and they need to, spend the money that they have budgeted. Yeah. Otherwise, it doesn't roll over into the next year. So I think I've actually seen a big increase in hiring at the start of this year, which we didn't expect at all, just given how poor last year was. My gut feeling is that people are getting a bit crazy ahead of what they feel is going to be an amazing 2025. Mm-hmm. I personally think in Q3 this will slow back down a little bit, and then we'll see how the US elections go. We'll see how the economy goes from there, and then if things trend positively, we'll have a strong start to 25. If things trend negatively, we might be in more of a conservative patch for hiring and also for winning projects. So it's a really nuanced question.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, in that sense too, because I've seen, a lot of these, we were talking a little bit about the startups and stuff that have been in the automation robotics space. And you're seeing some of them now that have, I guess, gotten to higher maturity levels and things. And, if they were US based originally, now they're starting to expand with like a European office or focusing on like Asia Pacific market. Is there more opportunity abroad potentially, like for someone that maybe is US based to find some type of roles over, whether it's European market or Asian Pacific market? I mean, what's your view there?
The Asian Pacific market is difficult because there's a lot of kind of manufacturers out of China that have products that are low cost, and arguably you could say it's akin to racking, is it's kind of like a race to the bottom in APAC, is like how cheap can you make it, and at that point you're just kind of scraping for margins. At least that's my perspective. Having watched Sean Pinnell's talk at the robotics summit in Boston, it seems like Locus are really bullish on Asia Pacific. So there must be, something that I'm missing a trick on there. And I certainly know that there's businesses like SoftBank and SoftBank Robotics that are doing big projects out in Asia Pacific. So I think to some degree, like for greenfield projects, there is scope over in Asia Pacific. So I'm talking generally about the call it race to the bottom on price. But broadly speaking, in Europe, I tend to find there is more opportunity for startups that maybe aren't even that mature. Traditionally speaking, Europe has been a bit quicker to adapt and to try new technologies than the US has. So businesses that are struggling to, I'll backtrack and say it's easier for a US business to enter Europe than it is for a European business to enter the US.
Interesting.
Just because there tends to be a level of hesitancy from the US market in trying new technologies. Now, that has slightly changed because businesses like GXO and DHL and many more are doing like the demo sites where they're gating off a bit of their warehouse, like Spanx in Atlanta with Digit, what GXO are doing. But it's really difficult to sell in the US unless you have reference sites. Whereas in Europe, I tend to find that there's more there's more drive to experiment with new equipment is what I would say.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's one thing too. I mean, I think from working in warehouse operations, I mean, I think certainly like in the US, like there's, I don't know if you would say it's a part of the culture, but it's definitely like a little bit of a skepticism or like, like a resistance to, change in a sense a little bit, right? And that disruption that, the fear that, I'm going to put this technology in and it's going to like uproot my operations and it's going to cause all these disruptions and things like that. But I think, I think to your point, as we see like kind of DHL and GXO really, taking time to look at these different technologies and, being some early adopters in some of these technologies too. I mean, I think that is changing a little bit. I think it's going to take a little while to trickle down to like that mid-market and smaller, mom and pop kind of 3PLs and things like that, warehousing companies. But I think it's getting to that point a little bit more.
Yeah.
So very interesting. I mean, perspectives there. And I think it's interesting that you get a little bit of like a unique view on the market because you talk to so many different people, right? And I guess I'm sure as people are transitioning to different roles and different companies and stuff, you get kind of a bit of an inside track there too. So very interesting perspective from you. So, I mean, as we look at talent, I mean, I think one of the big question marks for quite some time, right, and just supply chain in general, I think is, like how do we get the next generation interested in supply chain? And I think supply chain certainly got some spotlight, got some shine, not in the, I guess, best situation, right? And during COVID and pandemic and all that stuff. But now it's, becoming more of a prevalent thing. And, I certainly see as a professor in supply chain that, there's more students that are interested in supply chain. But I'll say that, the warehousing side of things is probably in many ways the least attractive to the students who are coming in. So, and I think automation and robotics helps to maybe make it cooler and more attractive in a sense. But I mean, from your view, I mean, how do we as an industry start to kind of attract that next generation and make sure that we do have like this pipeline of people coming in for talent in the market, not only from the perspective of just operational knowledge, but also the perspective to be able to now start to support these newer technologies that are just going to become more prevalent?
Yeah, I've got to give my hat off to the businesses like Cian and SSI or Dematic, Vanderlande for things of these natures. It sounds super basic, but it's starting with bringing on some summer interns and giving them a feel for what your business does and how it's unlocking operational value for the businesses that it claims to serve. So I think it's number one is visibility and making sure that we're bringing people into the organization every year to give them a flavor of what warehouse automation is and what supply chain is, because it's really easy to kind of sit back and just hire from within the industry and kind of just feed into that loop of people moving from system integrator to system integrator. So I think that's the first thing I would maybe encourage businesses to do. And I think to some extent, like over the next couple of years, we're going to see some private equity roll-ups and some bigger businesses come to fruition. So it's about making sure that you have the right HR and talent organization to create relationships with businesses like Georgia Tech, universities like Georgia Tech, and some of the leading supply chain and automation universities across the world, to make sure that we're bringing the right caliber of talent into the industry. And then I think it's again, to call one out, Fortner does a really good job with the ladder program, or LADR program. I'm not sure which they call it, but they bring in graduates into the business and they rotate them around the design, the sales, the estimating, the industrial engineering, the project management, so on and so forth. But they rotate graduates with valuable degrees through multiple departments to see where they enjoy and where they're the best fit. And for me, like, I don't see enough organizations talking about that and creating and publicizing their great relationships with these leading universities. So I think that's like the first thing that we can do. And I'd agree with your sentiment that I think automation is making supply chain more accessible and more interesting. I think to your slogan, like, warehouses can be sexy.
Yep, there we go. Right
yeah, it's right in the back. But warehouses can be cool. They can be fun. I think it's businesses like GXO are doing a fantastic job with making their brand like kind of exclusive, technology forward, and that's going to bring more interest to warehouse automation, broadly speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an interesting point in there too. Like, how do companies kind of like broadcast that a little more, right? Talk about that they have these relationships with the universities, or even just that they have internships too as well. I know, like, for my students that I teach, then, they're required to do some type of internship in their program to graduate. And it's always like a struggle for them to find them. And I find like a lot of companies don't necessarily like put it out there that they have internships. And I'm curious your thoughts on that. I mean, is there like a good resource for students to go for like internships specifically?
So I think any university that has close ties to logistics and warehouse automation, I think it's maybe a bit more upstream in saying, I think the earnest is on the actual OEM and system integrator to create the relationship with the universities if they haven't done already. And then secondarily is like make those job postings accessible and make those like opportunities accessible to students. So to my knowledge, businesses that do a good job, like the Vanderlandys, the Fortners, they probably have kind of deep relationships with the Georgia Techs, just to keep calling out an example. So I think it's speaking with your careers department within a university to kind of explore what strong partnerships exist and really leverage them. As far as ideas, I could probably brainstorm a few, but I'm not sure if they provide the most value, so I'd have to come back to you on that one.
All right, well, maybe we can do like a separate little session for students or something in the future for talent development. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting to see that. And I think, like you said, when companies are bringing the coolness or the sexiness around what they're doing and those things and highlighting that, I think that certainly helps like to get that talent interested. And I'm curious from your perspective too. I mean, because I think there's like, another source of potential talent for the automation robotics market, which would be people that are already like end users, right? I mean, sometimes we see, and, I've certainly seen this a lot where, just in conversations, somebody had an idea for some technology and, they wanted to figure out like, where's a place where this technology would work or solve a problem. And it ends up being, in the logistics space. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have a logistics or operations background, right? But I imagine there's certainly a need or a hole where, people who were working as, whether it's a warehouse manager, director of ops, something like that, on the actual end user side of things, could transition over to the solution provider side. So for someone that would be looking to do something like that, I mean, I guess first, is there definitely like a need, a demand for that? And second, like how would somebody go about, making that kind of transition?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think just to address the point of, is there a need? I think definitely the industry's compound annual growth is set to continue to grow exponentially. There's going to be a need for and a gap for talent and new talent specifically. So one of the questions that I frequently ask my clients is like, what does your roadmap to bringing new talent look like? And whenever I'm running a new search, I ask the question of, hey, are you open to seeing candidates from an end user as well? Where I would focus if I was currently at an end user would be is, number one, is my company looking to implement automation into the facility that I work in? Or if you're at corporate or design, whatever it might be, does automation and will automation come under my purview in a small way? So whether that's a Locus box, and a Locus is a well coveted core entry solution for warehouse operations. Like, how can I be involved and have my hands on automation? And if you're an end user and your company isn't doing that, I think there's red flags in the fact that they're not doing that. But I would also maybe focus just as a point to put a route into automation. I would focus on getting to another end user that is focusing on automation, because that's the kind of business where you'll learn and grow and understand automation, its capabilities, and how you can be a meaningful part of a systems integrator or an OEM. If you are an end user that has and does implement automation, it's about understanding where your personal skill set lies. Like if you're a solutions engineer that does facility designs and solution design, you could quite comfortably transition to be a sales engineer or a solutions applications engineer for an OEM. I see that happen all the time. I've personally taken people from 3PLs and put them into an OEM. The only point I would make is try not to go to a systems integrator that has actually worked with the end user that you're at, because that can end up in points of contention. I also like to look at products that have a similar industrial life cycle to warehouse automation products, because you typically find competencies akin to ones within our industry at businesses that have quite an industrial product with a similar life cycle to automation. The skill sets that you find there are typically project managers, so looking at capital projects, and that's where you can find some really strong talent, in my opinion. But yeah, broadly speaking, my advice would be try and connect with somebody, not to self-plug or to plug myself in, but try and connect with somebody that can give you a good understanding of what your skill sets are and how they translate into the systems integrator or OEM market. Because I think that is the hardest part in saying, like, okay, this is what I'm doing today as an end user. How does that translate into a systems integrator? Because it's not necessarily linear. Like if you're a director of ops, you may end up being like a really compassionate customer success or customer service director. If you're a project manager, you may work better in a program type position for a systems integrator. I think it's trying to work with a recruiter. There's a lot of good recruiters in this industry that can, guide you to the right spot within the industry. So that's my official advice, call it.
Official. We got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Official.
And I know one good recruiter actually I could think of right here. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really good advice, because I think there is the opportunity to do that, right? I mean, I think there's value in, having for the automation and robotics companies, like having that end user experience on the team too. And I think, but like you said, it's not necessarily like a linear transition, right? Like it's, how does that fit? And obviously working, with a recruiter like yourself, I mean, can certainly help you see like what's the way to go about that. So very interesting to talk about the whole talent landscape within the automation and robotics market and get some more insights on that. But I mean, you're talking to, multiple different companies all the time, people from different companies. So I'm curious, what are some of the kind of current trends around automation and robotics that you're seeing in the market, just, in general? I mean, what's really kind of top of mind? What's exciting? What are people interested in? What's maybe not so interested in? What is kind of standing out to you?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to general industry first, and then I'll talk
Sure.
to recruiting just to make sure that I'm talking to my specialism. So when it comes to automation at the moment, what I'm predicting is consolidation. There was rumors of a big acquisition in December that didn't go through for numerous reasons, but I think that's a good example of, and as well, just to call out, Invarta was, taken by the McMurray Stern Group, which is now MSI Automate. Like, you're starting to see these bigger businesses through either private equity roll-ups or M&A. So I'm seeing bigger businesses, broadly speaking, because at that point, I think bigger systems integrators on an enterprise level can provide better quality services to 3PL. So I'm seeing roll-ups. I'm seeing a real need from the end users and call it a criteria for any new products or new entrants to have not just a cool product, because that doesn't cut it anymore, but I would say a product that solves an operational challenge and is focused on solving an operational challenge. I think gone are the days where you can say, hey, look at this new product that I created. What part of your warehouse operations issues can it solve? I think new products really need to be intentional nowadays, and I think I'm seeing that reflected by kind of end user, call it vendor selection criteria. I also think there was a good bit of discourse around our AMRs becoming a commodity earlier this year, and to some extent, I was saying, I don't think they are, but to some extent, I can agree that they are. And that comes down to, I think we've reached a point where the hardware can only go so far. It's like,
Right.
what else can we do to an AMR to make it better? It's probably marginal, but on the software side, I think it's more valuable than ever to make sure that they have a solid fleet management and software platform, and there's, it's reliable, scalable, and maintainable. So I disagree with the fact that AMRs are becoming a commodity. I think AMRs and that market will go through some consolidation. I think, the best vendors will stay, and the ones that aren't focused on solving operational issues and don't have a scalable or good software platform will go, or run out of business. So that's my industry insights at the moment. As far as recruiting, I think I've seen last year more project managers on the market than I ever did, because just there wasn't that much project flow, and existing projects weren't enough to keep everyone busy. But coming into this year, I think last year companies survived on kind of controls projects quite a lot. There was like little $1 million, $2 million projects here and there that kept margins looking okay for most people last year, and it involved controls, whether that's like a computer control system switched out for a PLC control system. Either way, I think the demand for controls engineers is going to continue to trend upwards, just because of the nature of how we sold last year. I feel personally that there is a select, I don't want to say select number of fantastic salespeople in the industry, because I'm sure there's loads and loads that I don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I feel like sales and people with relationships, companies are trying to buy relationships more than they are trying to find skill set.
Yeah.
So what that means is, potentially hiring a really senior salesperson because of their relationships with a massive end user like Amazon or somebody like that, and trying to propel their business forward that way. So that's another quite talent dynamic that I've seen. Last year, the interview cycles went from where it would be 2 to 3 weeks in 2022. Last year, like to hire someone, it took months, and there was so much candidate disengagement because budgets were so tight, and these hiring decisions were scrutinized on so much. I'm seeing that relax a little bit. People are looking to push processes again. it's becoming more of a candidate-driven market again, rather than client-driven, which is what I saw in 2023. So I would say those are the main ones that I can call out right now, but I'm sure there'll be tons more as this year goes.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting insights there. I mean, I think, on the industry side of things, I mean, I think it's interesting, like that you mentioned how, because this just came up last week in a conversation at Momentum too with somebody else where, they're saying the same thing where like, it's not really like the industry is not really receptive to like, oh, here's a creative solution now. Like, can you help me find a place like to solve the problem? Like that's happening, right? It's like more like, well, bring the solution that's already solving a problem that exists, right? Like know like what the problem is and then solve for it. And I think that's pretty interesting and interesting too, to hear from the talent perspective too and the recruiting perspective. I mean, I think it's pretty interesting that there's so many project managers out there, which I guess makes sense. Like you mentioned, with the number of projects like dying down. So very, very interesting stuff from you here, Cian, and it's great to talk to you and very interesting to learn about this kind of side of the industry, something we haven't really touched on the podcast before, but I think it's very interesting. And it kind of tells a little bit too about, kind of the relationship between the talent and what's actually happening within the industry and kind of guiding in that way. So really appreciate you coming on and talking to me today about this. If people are interested in getting in touch with you or learning more about Proactive Global, maybe they're looking for their next role, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I'm extremely active over LinkedIn. If you got me a connection request or a note, I'm pretty much 99.9% active on LinkedIn and available there. And then if you want to get in touch with anyone at Proactive, I think the best way to get in touch would be through our division leaders, which would be myself, Gerard Hegney, Isaac Griffith, who I can send you all the emails to as well, if that makes life easier.
Sure. Yeah. All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. But definitely connect with Cian on LinkedIn for sure. He's definitely active on there, not only from a recruitment perspective, but also from the perspective of just having an interest within the industry and sharing insights there as well. So Cian, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.